everyone. Thanks for attending this session on genealogy resources in the Digital Library on American Slavery. I'm Dr. Claire Heckel, the project coordinator for People Not Property Slave Deeds of North Carolina. This project is based at the University Libraries at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. The Digital Library on American Slavery is an expanding resource compiling various independent online collections focused on race and slavery in the American South, made searchable through a single, simple interface. Although the current focus of the DLAS is sources associated with North Carolina, there is considerable data contained in it relating to all 15 slave states and Washington, D.C., including detailed personal information about enslaved people, slaveholders, and free people of color. The DLAS is also the first recognized digital facility in the National Park Service's Network to Freedom National Underground Railroad network of sites. At the Digital Library on American Slavery, users can search across platforms using the tools at the top of the page. You can search by name or keyword and narrow down by decade and state, as well as status: enslaved, slaveholder, free person of color. Here, for example, I have entered the name Sarah in the Search DLAS search bar. Let's say I know that Sarah was alive in the decade 1840 to 1849 and was enslaved in North Carolina. Searching with these criteria brings up 27 records that include the name Sarah as an enslaved person. This is just two examples of those 27. One is a slave deed, a property deed from Buncombe County, North Carolina. Bill of sale for Sarah and her children, Susan and Alpha. The others, that would be the slaveholder, Sarah Gayagan, and Marianne Barnard and Sarah Emmeline Barnard, probably the recipients, as well as petitions, court petitions. William Nash Dennis and his wife, Jane Clarilla Dennis, petitioned the court for the distribution of slaves. The enslaved mentioned there, including a Sarah. So if you've got a first name or even a last name, a rough time period, and an idea of where your ancestors might have been, this can be a good way to search available records. I'm going to provide now a little more detail on the various elements of the DLAS, starting with the Race and Slavery Petitions Project. The Race and Slavery Petitions Project offers data on race and slavery extracted from 18th and 19th century documents and processed over a period of 18 years, primarily through the efforts of former UNCG history professor Lauren Schwenninger. Dr. Schwenninger has published a number of books on free persons of color and enslaved people in North Carolina and in the South more broadly that are available for purchase. The project contains detailed information on about 150,000 individuals, including enslaved people, free people of color, and whites, extracted from 2,975 legislative petitions and 14,512 county court petitions, as well as from a wide range of related documents, including wills, inventories, deeds, bills of sale, depositions, court proceedings, amended petitions, and others. Buried in these documents are the names and other data on roughly 80,000 enslaved people, 8,000 free people of color, and 62,000 whites, both slave owners and non-slave owners. This database is national in scope. Just an example of some of the information that's contained in the Race and Slavery Petitions Project. You can search by name, state, and keyword, and also browse by subject. There's a glossary of terms and a help with searching section to assist with individual research. The original documents are on microfilm referenced on this website. An overview of the subjects you can browse: slave ownership, changes in slave ownership, slaves and slave management, attaining freedom, free people of color, crime and punishment involving enslaved people and free people of color, health and death and disease, social and civic life, marriage and women, as well as migration, population and transportation, family, and specific crops. The Race and Slavery Petitions Project is the best place in the DLAS to find documents relating to enslaved persons acquiring freedom or mentions of free persons of color. Attainment of freedom falls into several categories, including purchasing one's own freedom, purchasing the freedom of family, court cases relating to runaways, and owners petitioning the courts to emancipate enslaved people. These court documents also document other forms of resistance, such as retaliation against slaveholders and efforts to organize or encourage rebellion and resistance. In a petition from the North Carolina County of Pasquotank, Lemuel Overton, of mixed blood but born free, acknowledges that he did faithfully serve in the last American war with Great Britain. He reveals that he was by consent able to marry a slave woman named Rose and had my eldest son John by her. Overton has been able to purchase his wife and son and has had a second son and is asking that his wife and 2 sons be emancipated and given his last name. In another example from 1831, just after the Nat Turner Rebellion, in Lenoir County, 87 residents have sought to exclude all colored retailers of cakes, spirits, etc. from its limits, except those licensed by the county court. They are convinced that the free Negroes and slaves hiring their time from adjoining counties have not only produced serious loss and inconvenience by the temptations which are thus held out to their slaves, to steal lambs, pigs, and poultry to barter with them, but also they firmly aver that said persons do a far more serious and incalculable injury by the facilities thus afforded for the dissemination of seditious writings and notions. So here we see slaveholder anxieties about resistance to enslavement being spread verbally and in the form of pamphlets and newsletters distributed in goods. Other documents of resistance to enslavement are a petition from Sampson County in North Carolina around 1830, in which sundry inhabitants of the counties of Sampson, Bladen, New Hanover, and Duplin complain that our slaves are become almost uncontrollable. They go and come when and where they please, and if an attempt is made to correct them, they fly into the woods and there continue for months and years, committing grievous depredations on our cattle, hogs, and sheep, and many other things. I've chosen to highlight some of these examples because while the Race and Slavery Petitions Project covers a number of topics, it's rare in our formal histories of the United States that we get such insights into efforts at subverting and escaping enslavement in the United States. Also documenting escape from slavery are the North Carolina Runaway Slave Ads. In an advertisement placed in North Carolina by James H. Keyes, his slave Jacob is described as having been heard by the overseer to throw out some hints that all should be free, and that he saw no reason why the sweat of his brow should be expended in supporting the extravagance and idleness of any man, or some words to that effect. This principle, I am informed, he wishes to impress upon the minds of my other Negroes, and I doubt not will attempt to do the same wherever he goes. It therefore becomes not only the duty, but the interest of every person possessed of such property to apprehend such fellow and thereby avert the progress of such dangerous principles. The North Carolina Runaway Slave Ads project is collecting images of all known runaway slave advertisements published in North Carolina newspapers from 1751 to 1865. The project is still underway and has currently collected images from 1751 up to 1841. It includes on the website contextualizing essays as well as an annotated bibliography to aid researchers. It also has a searchable database. Runaway slave ads include such details as the names of enslaved people and slaveholders, descriptions of enslaved people, both their appearance and personality traits that might stand out. Frequently, literacy, trades, and other skills are mentioned, as well as states of health, illness, or injury. They provide insight into the attitudes of slaveholders, as well as common routes of escape and hiding places, which were quite varied depending on time and region, and specific strategies of escape. For example, Wilmington, North Carolina, 1773, ran away from the subscriber about 15 months since, 2 Negro fellows and a wench, Will, George, and Sylvia. Will is about 25 years of age, 5 feet 8 inches high, of a yellowish complexion, slim made and a little knock-kneed, his teeth filed and his country marks on his face, referring to facial scarification common in West Africa. A cooper or barrel maker and rough carpenter. George is 20 years of age, 5 feet 5 inches high, of a dark complexion, is very artful or clever. He has been used to take care of horses. Sylvia is a likely or attractive young wench, about 5 feet 5 inches high, of a yellowish complexion, her teeth filed. She has attended in a house. So at this early point, when enslaved people were still being imported to North Carolina from Africa, we see a mention of a common beauty and rite of passage practice of teeth filing, seen here on 2 men from the Congo, as well as facial scarification, which could be localized to small marks on the cheeks or all over the face, as we see here. This brings us to the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. This is a project of Emory University and is not currently searchable through our overarching database search, but we link to it because of its value for those researching the transatlantic slave trade and enslavement in the United States. The database now comprises 36,000 individual slaving expeditions between 1514 and 1866. It includes informative images and maps about the slave trade. As you can see here, the United States was really a drop in the bucket of the massive transatlantic slave trade to places like the Caribbean and South America. There are lesson plans, image galleries, and a time-lapse animation of the transatlantic slave trade. It shows ships going from the coasts of Africa to South America, the Caribbean, and North America. The dots are color-coded by the flag of the nation the ship was sailing under, primarily Portugal, Great Britain, France, and Spain. And here you can see over time between 1580 and 1865. Another still from later in the video, 1805. You can also narrow down and filter certain areas to focus on, producing summary statistics, tables. There's downloadable data, timeline. Here I've zoomed in on regions of arrival, Georgia, Maryland, North Carolina. At the other end of the transatlantic slave trade, you can also focus on specific ports of export, such as Senegambia, the Gold Coast, the Bight of Benin, Bight of Biafra, the Congo. There's also a growing database on the intra-American slave trade. So this is where the slave trade between the Caribbean and the United States, for example, would be documented. The African Names Database is a list of passengers taken as slaves. This includes frequently their ages and heights. So for those with interest in names of African origin, this is an excellent resource. And that brings us to People Not Property, Slave Deeds of North Carolina. This is the most recent addition to the Digital Library on American Slavery. It's a 3-year project. We are halfway through our 3rd year. Little less than halfway through our 3rd year. We'll be ending in October. And it's being funded by a 3-year grant from the National Archives, National Historic Records and Publications Commission. You can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at People Not Property. An example of a slave deed from Beaufort County, a bill of sale in which one Negro girl named Nancy, about 6 or 7 years old, was sold by William Shaw to Joseph Ransom for the sum of $175 on August 14, 1810. We and our volunteers have been working to identify deeds that mention enslaved people. They're mixed in and hidden among hundreds of thousands of pages of property deeds, and we're working to transcribe the pertinent information in them so that they are searchable online. We're working with organizations like the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society and other community organizations. Mr. Fred Watts is the OGS liaison, and he's a member of the project steering committee. Supporting faculty research at UNC Greensboro, North Carolina A&T University, and North Carolina Central University, as well as student participation in this research, has also been a focus of the project. In this first phase, we've started with 26 out of the 100 counties in North Carolina, and results from these 26 counties will be searchable online by October of this year. This is a preview of what the web page will look like. There may be some changes as we're still in development, but you'll be able to see an image of each and every slave deed, as well as the names of all of the people involved. So grantor, grantee. We'll also have grantor and grantee locations so that people can track the movements of enslaved people, as well as family relationships, amounts of money, any special trades, age groups. You can also download the original as a JPEG and export data as a CSV or in JSON format. To date, we have identified and documented 19,174 slave deeds. Volunteers have contributed 4,400 of these deeds. Our student researchers and student employees have contributed, and counties have contributed as well. The big effort now is transcribing the information contained in the slave deeds. 22.3% are not transcribed. 50.8% are partially transcribed, meaning some of the information has been entered into spreadsheets. With about 3/4 of the deeds remaining to be transcribed, we're in need of volunteers now more than ever. We're also in the process of editing images. See here, there are multiple deeds on these 2 pages, and when we edit the images, we want only 1 deed per image and only 1 image per deed to make it easier on the reader. Volunteer William Durant has done some extensive transcription work and wrote about his experience in a recent issue of the OGS newsletter that some of you may have seen. Also, I and a senior undergraduate research assistant at UNCG have published articles in the North Carolina Genealogical Society Journal. One of them is an overview to slave deeds of North Carolina, and the other stems from our student October Kamara's research in Surry County. October and I were able to start from deeds with a list of names of the enslaved, and the slave holders, and work our way back through books of family history to find a common ancestor for 1, 2, 3, 4 generations of enslaved people. A book detailing early families of Grayson County, Virginia, mentions that William Bourne purchased 2 enslaved women in Richmond during an undated trip there. They were named Granny Beck and Amy. Both were born in Africa and kidnapped together. Amy then had 18 children. 2 of each of these children were willed to offspring of William Bourne. Charlotte and Patsy went to Amelia Millie McKinney, who then had quite a few children. And her children had many slave deeds doing deals around these children. So the 4th generation. Transcription. As I mentioned, we need volunteers now more than ever to complete this project. Completing our project on time and exceeding our goals only makes it more likely that we'll get future funding to continue beyond the 26 original counties. Indexing was the process of reading through deeds and recording just the book and page number of any documents that mention enslaved people. And now we're in the phase of transcription. So that's reading through the deeds and entering personal information like names, places, ages, and other details. At this point, I'm going to delve more deeply into the project, what's involved in volunteering, and provide some additional details on what exactly slave deeds are and what kind of information they contain. If you're not interested in volunteering, you may exit the presentation. If you're interested in volunteering, or if you'd just like to learn more about these documents and the kinds of information they can offer, I'd invite you to stay. This handbook is available on our website. It includes an overview of the project goals, volunteering, practice deeds, how to access the deeds, transcription, examples, and a guide to historic handwriting. This guide to historic handwriting may be useful regardless of whether you're working with slave deeds or other historic deeds in your genealogical and historical research. I've already mentioned the project goals. So when I say we've been making lists of deeds by book and page, we have the county, the book, it's either a number or a letter, and the page. These are used to construct a document ID. Our aim is that by looking at this document ID, you can work your way back to the actual document. So for Wake, WAK.T.5.1 is a slave deed on page 5 of Book T in Wake County. The first step to complete is to complete a short Google form to register as a volunteer. Once you've completed the form, a member of our team will reach out in 2 to 5 days. We'll provide you with a set of 7 practice deeds and a link to a Google form for transcription, and you'll use a Google form to record the relevant details from the practice deeds. Once you've completed the practice deeds, you can email me, ceheckle@uncg.edu, and let me know that you're ready for an assignment. You'll begin with a set of 7 deeds, as I said, and the form looks like this. We'll provide the county, you enter your email address, and then enter the book, number, or letter, page. We have a reminder for how to construct a document ID, so you'll assign that document ID. Select the type of deed. We have a guide to those in a moment. The month, date, year, and additional information that I'll cover briefly. Accessing the deeds is working through FamilySearch.org. They have scanned the entire deed books. So working with these images, and we make a distinction, there's an image number that we do not use versus the page numbers written at the tops of the pages. As you can see, the image number is different than the page number because there are often 2 pages per image. There are also tools in the upper right-hand corner where you can adjust the image brightness and contrast if they're difficult to read. So the data that we're transcribing is document data. This is again the county code, where to find it. The type of deed. Bill of sale is the most common type of deed. It's basically a receipt for a sale. It'll list a price paid, usually a large amount, compared to land deeds that are cheaper, and includes some combination of the words given, granted, bargained, and sold, or give, grant, bargain, and sell. Another common type of deed is the deed of trust, in which the grantor owes money to a third party and puts enslaved people up as collateral on the loan. The grantee pays a small amount, 10 shillings or $1, and temporarily takes ownership of the enslaved people. A deed of trust will usually include the phrase, stands lawfully indebted to, or is earnestly desirous to settle this debt. And only the names of the grantor and grantee are recorded. By which I mean, if there are people listed to whom the grantor owes money, we don't include them in the transcription because we're really trying to trace the movement of enslaved people, and the person to whom money is owed doesn't usually take ownership of any of the enslaved people. A deed of gift is pretty straightforward. It is an enslaved person transferred of ownership with no money or a very small amount of money mentioned. Usually the words natural love and affection are used because it's often a parent to a child. Marriage contracts. Because a married woman's property became her husband's legal property upon marriage, a marriage contract was sometimes made to protect the property of the bride-to-be. The marriage contract places a male relative, usually, as a trustee of the bride's property, so that The husband can't sell it off to cover his gambling debts, and it'll be inherited by the wife's children. The intended marriage will be mentioned at the beginning of the document. The last will and testament may be the most familiar and recognizable of these legal documents. It usually includes familiar words like last will and testament, or sometimes phrases like being of sound mind and body, or sick of body but sound of mind, and they document how someone's property will be divided when they die. Apprenticeship bonds are rare, but they do appear in deed books. They're not exactly enslavement, but because so many people of color were apprenticed, in fact, by law, if a child of color did not have a legally recognized father, he or she was considered an orphan and legally bound to be apprenticed. So we keep track of those as well. Partition in kind and partition by sale are perhaps the most complex. When a slaveholder died without a will, or the will simply stated that the property should be divided equally among the heirs but didn't state how, a partition document was drawn up to divide the property among the heirs. A partition in kind splits up the property and lists which heirs get which property specifically. But in a partition by sale, the property is sold, or its value is estimated, and the amount is divided among the inheritors. If a document doesn't fall into any of these categories, we list it as other. A note on the seizure of property. It wasn't uncommon for property, including enslaved people, to be seized by the sheriff or other agent of government and sold at a public auction to settle a lawsuit. These cases should be classified as a bill of sale, and the grantor is not the sheriff or agent who seized the enslaved people, but the person from whom the property was seized. And again, this is because we're trying to reconstruct the life histories and movements of enslaved people, and we don't really want to confuse things by someone who has just interceded in the situation as an agent. To enter the date, select the month from a drop-down menu and type the day and year in the appropriate boxes. Sometimes there's one date listed in the body of the deed and another in the text beneath the deed. We're interested in the body of the deed. That's the date the transaction occurred, and it may have been read into the court records much later. Grantor and grantee information. Grantor is the first party, the slaveholder who is giving up ownership. The second party is the grantee, the person becoming the new slaveholder. The seller and buyer in a bill of sale. Names should be entered as last comma first and separated by semicolons. So a husband and wife, Doe comma John, semicolon, Doe comma Jane. Location should be listed in as much detail as possible. This is not always the same location as the county that the deed is from. So unless the location is specifically stated, we enter not stated. In the case of complex deeds that have multiple grantees and numerous enslaved people, let's say it's one of those partitions where a slaveholder dies and enslaved people go to his various heirs. If each grantee is receiving a different group of enslaved people, each grantee gets their own form. Again, this is just to keep track of where enslaved people are going in these historical documents. These entries will all have an identical document ID number because it's the same document. But in order to keep the right group of enslaved people with the right slaveholder and in the right location, they each get their own form. So now we get to the information on enslaved people. Usually only first names are given for enslaved people, and these should be listed in the order given in the document and separated by a semicolon, as in this example. If no names are given, this is most frequently the case with small children. Enter unnamed slave or unnamed child, unnamed slaves. If the mother is mentioned, for example, if it was specifically mentioned that this is Lucy's child, it would be Peter, Sarah, Jack, Lucy, unnamed child of Lucy. We enter Family relationships right next to names because we really want to keep those front and center. This has been based on requests from genealogists and family historians. So for example, if it lists that all of these children are Sarah's children, we have Sarah, Jack, child of Sarah, Lucy, child of Sarah, and unnamed child of Sarah. So this might be a stand-in for a last name if these people show up in subsequent deeds. More rarely, a husband and wife will show up, and we add that information as well. And in that case, both parents are listed. If nicknames are given, we also use parentheses. We have a deed, for example, that lists New Peter and Peter or Pete. So they're both listed as Peter, parentheses New Peter, parentheses Pete. If you can't determine a name or a place name, use brackets and the word unclear. This differentiates from not stated or none, so that we know there is one, it's just illegible. Skills or trades can also be listed in parentheses. And again, this is just to try and help us figure out when a Peter is mentioned in different documents in the absence of a last name, if it's the same person. We enter the total number of enslaved people listed. And if ages are given, they go in the same order as the names, with zeros for placeholders and semicolons. This is so when we import it all into the database, the ages get paired up with the correct individuals based on their order. We have family relationships in a drop-down menu, individual, only one person listed, a group, multiple people listed but not related or not all related, mother and children, and family other. Additional details on family relationships can be entered in the notes field at the end of the form. Gender may be indicated by the words man, boy, woman, or girl, and it can often be inferred from names, though we do urge you to exercise caution when inferring gender from names, and only venture a guess if you're reasonably certain. Mixed group refers to a group of males and females in the drop-down menu, and if gender is unclear for one or more person in the group, select not stated. Age group. These options include adults, children, mixed group, and not stated. Following the conventions of the antebellum period, children are considered to be aged 0 to 15 years, and adults are 16 and older. The terms man and woman almost always refer to adults, so when you see the word Negro man or woman slave, you can assume it's an adult. But because slaveholders use the terms boy and girl to refer to both children and adults, we can't infer an age if just boy or girl is stated without an age, so enter not stated. The terminology used to describe race in the deeds is outdated, but we want to accurately reflect those terms in our transcriptions because these are historical documents. The most common term is Negro, but other terms used include mulatto, Indian or native, griff, white, other, and not stated. Sometimes physical appearance, such as skin tone or mannerisms, will be described, and those can be added in the notes field. Amount and currency, these are two different fields. The amount will be a number. And the currency, dollars, pounds, it changes with time, especially before and after the Revolutionary War. For a gift, there isn't a currency, so zero is the amount, gift is the currency. Same with debt. If we have that small amount of money paid for a large amount of property that's being held in trust, 5 shillings debt, $1 debt. In the next few pages, we have examples of deeds where the important information is highlighted and entered below exactly as it would be entered in the forms. So before completing the practice deeds, I would suggest reviewing these and seeing if the way that you would fill them out corresponds with how they've been filled out here. This final one is a good example of there being 2 grantees. They're making a division of the property of Robert Young, Anne Young, and John Young. So here we have a single document ID, but listing that Benny, Nell, and Dublin are going from Robert Young to Anne Young, and that an unstated list of enslaved people are going from Robert Young to John Young. And here's the Reading Historic Handwriting Guide. All of these words and letter examples have been pulled from North Carolina slave deeds. And again, these might be useful whether you volunteer with the project or are just trying to read historic documents for your own research. We have examples from A to Z. And again, these can be found on our website. This concludes my presentation on the Digital Library on American Slavery. Thank you so much for your interest. Again, here's our website, library.uncg.edu/slavery. And you can follow us on social media @PeopleNotProperty. Have a lovely day.